Hello everyone, this is the IfcArchitect, and today we're going to be going through the BlenderBim add-on update for 24.04.02. This is late, but we're going to go through it. This new release has 830 new features and fixes. It's owl-built environment, helps support the BlenderBim add-on. It's 100% free and open source software that lets you document and author BIM data fully to ISO standards. Alright, let's get into it. So you can download and get the add-on from blenderbim.org, as shown in the installation video, which will be in the description. Because of the previous two releases were missed, this is a massive Flemish giant rabbit-sized release. Okay, deep breath, get ready, go. So it always starts with an image of Dion's bunny in front of the BlenderBim logo or something along those lines. Here's just a cute one to mark the release. And then you can just see in this little note, all the screenshots are from Opening Design Highland Haven project, licensed under the CC BY SA 4.0. Check out Opening Design today. They do architectural work that is open source. It's brilliant. Check them out. They have amazing example models that you can download and actually experiment with. All right, let's get into the actual updates. The first one is bulk link massive models and clipping planes. Previously, linking in reference models was a manual, tedious process. You first needed to load in the IFC in its own Blender session, save a blend file, then link in the blend file. Linking also preserved geometry, but lost metadata since the IFC was not referenced in the active session. Having many IFC models open also ran into memory limits. This has now been resolved. By headlessly processing IFCs as chunk geometry in a sub-process with metadata stored in an indexed SQLite database, you can now link in massive IFC models in bulk, not by one. Alright, let's try those out. Okay, so you can see I've just got a file open here, and all we need to do is go to Project Overview. Underneath Project Setup, we're going to go to Links, and we're going to click on Link IFC. That's going to open up a dialog. We're just going to navigate to where our linked files are. I've just got two prepared here. And I'm just going to say link IFC. And you can see they loaded in blazing fast. Okay, cool. Let's move on to the next one. In the example stress test, it takes Dion here 26 seconds to load in 16 preprocessed IFC models, totaling 2.3 gigs, running at 15 frames per second using 69% of his 32 gigabytes of RAM. He can instantly click on objects and get basic data about them. Without chunking, this would have been 346,600 objects, excluding objects without geometry. Note that this is a completely loaded model, no live streaming is required. This is the fastest open source solution available right now. Yes, I mean, for our very small model, it was nearly instant. So quite awesome. For model navigation, the much hidden fly and walk modes in Blender are now given prominent and easy shortcuts in the new Explore tool. FPS performance has also been improved by enabling dynamic viewport culling mode, which auto-toggles box visibility of objects as you fly around the model. After processing, the results are cached, so the next time it is opened will be much faster. You can also quickly set an orbit center in case you get lost or are unfamiliar with how to rotate in 3D. This means that for huge companies working on major projects, the BlenderBim add-on is now becoming a viable coordination viewer to replace proprietary tools. The IFC to SQL conversion is also available as an IFC patch recipe, which you can link into the BI dashboarding insight tools. This SQL schema is optimized for accessing metadata, not for retaining full semantics for IFC, so it is perfect for simple analytics. I think I can demonstrate the navigation tool, so let's try that out. Okay, so you can see on the left-hand side here, there's this new thing called the Explore tool, and inside of it, we've got a bunch of hotkeys. This first one is called walk mode, so you can just press Shift and W on your keyboard, and it will turn it into a first-person navigation mode. So you can see at the bottom, I've got confirm, cancel, backwards, walk, left, right, etc. as hotkeys. So if I press W and I press Shift, I can move forward. If I press S, I can move backwards on my keyboard. A will take me to the left, and D will take me to the right. This is a very useful navigation mode if you want to see first-person views and really inspect things from a normal person height, essentially. So quite cool. All right, let's get back to the updates. All right. Okay, you can also now easily create clipping planes, which works even on massive models. This viewport-only clipping is fantastic for model coordination, tasks, and are easy to flip, delete, and word effect material shaders. There is an experimental capping feature for those who might want to use this to create sectional renders. It is also possible to visually append elements in your current project from the linked models. A word of warning that the new linking feature currently only supports manual input of defining the false origin, if any, which means that those unfamiliar with georeferencing and coordinates may get unexpected results and cannot rely on auto-detected origins. So this is quite a common issue. If you're pulling in a series of models that have like a global coordinate, just make sure that it's right, that it isn't calculating it twice. but that's just something you're going to have to do per model. And you can see here's a little GIF of the clipping plane working in the space, and let's just see if we can get it working inside of Blender. Okay, so we're back inside of the model. I'm just selecting the Explore tool, and then I'm just choosing a wall and a 3D cursor to add the clipping plane to, and I'm just going to press Shift-C, and there you can see it's been added to the wall there. So we've got this little toggle which we can pull, and you can see that we are clipping this plane in real time. And this is just a visual clip. This is not actually a section, but it's quite good for navigation. I can press rotate like in different directions, I think. And once I stop it, it will basically clip it at any angle we want it to. But in this case, I'm just going to delete this so we can just continue navigation. There we go. All right. Okay, so the next point is a complete rewrite of clash detection algorithms. IfcClash previously used the HPP FCL library to perform collisions. This worked but was not tailored to the AEC industry and incurred a speed penalty to passing geometry to and from this library, presumably, or to and fro. The IFC OpenShell geometry tree now supports significantly faster clash detection features built in. 3 clash detection modes are now supported: intersection, where elements protrude into or pierce one another; collision, where there is any sort of touching surface between elements; or clearance, where objects may not touch but will come within a distance threshold of one another. Critically, the intersection test results now support much more meaningful protrusion distances, allowing you to filter and sort high and low priority clashes. Clearance clash checks is a completely new capability that was not possible before. Clash results are more meaningful, highlighting exact coordinates of clash detections and protrusion distance measurements, and clash types. Example, protruding versus collision versus piercing versus clearance. Okay, cool. And you can see an example here, and it's a lot faster and it's a lot more effective. Clashes are also significantly faster, right there. Equivalent clash tests can now be in the range of 100 times to 1,000 times faster than before. Work is half complete in supporting performing clashes across many gigabytes of IFC models, addressing memory concerns, but this is not yet available to users. For example, an internal collision test of 200 megabyte IFC model with 18,500 objects might only take 0.45 seconds for the actual collision process itself. There is a much improved clash interface highlighting clash groups and merging the clash results and clash sets in a single panel. Applying clash filters now also uses the new Search Filter Groups UI. For developers wanting to make use of this, the geometry tree documentation has been updated. So if you're a developer and you want to expand on this, please check it out. Okay, the next one is Blender 4.1 support and distribution packaging. There is now support for Blender 4.1, and this also means support for Python 3.11. Dependencies have been cleaned up, meaning significantly lighter installs. Previously, users would download 116 to 163 megabyte zip, and much bigger when extracted, but file sizes are now about 60% what they were, down to 67 to 100 megabytes, depending on the operating system. It's really cool. And yes, I'm using Blender 4.1 for both of these installs, so this is the one you want to use. Blender 4.2 is out as of the recording of this video, but it uses a different process. So you need to wait for a video for that or request it at some point. All right, a straggling issue related to Blender 4.0 support was fixed. External shaders will now work again in Blender 4.1. Funnily enough, if you really want to, you can at least install the BlenderBim add-on on Blender 3.3 and lower now, but we don't recommend it. There's also support to install packages from pip in the debug panel for those using Blender as a development environment in companies or experimenting with features. Packaging has been updated with support for Python 3.7 and 3.8 dropped. PYPI dependencies have now have Shapely, date utils, and more optional dependencies depending on the functionality you need. The new bSDD library now has PyPI metadata, so you can install it with pip thanks to Jay Gunstone. Thank you. Work has begun supporting the new Blender extension system. It will be a while until we fully support it, but this system will be coming in the future. Blender versions to allow users to keep add-ons updated from app stores and update directly with the Blender interface. Yes, so this is going to happen essentially at the end of August, beginning of September 2024. Structural simulation major updates. Jesus Build has done huge updates on IfcTester with thousands of lines of changes, and it totally looks awesome and deserves its own section and picture. But Dion is not a structural engineer, and neither am I, so he has no idea how to describe it. Definitely check out the commit there, and there will be a link to this release in the description. More documentation for users and developers. This is always welcome. Documentation has seen its usual set of updates, including updated screenshots for BIM models, fixes to misleading text, incorrect code samples, especially a significant number of IFC patch recipes, supported systems, and so on. It's also received a style update that matches the styling of the main IFC OpenShell and BlenderBim add-on websites. You can now also copy code from the docs or jump straight to editing doc pages that you run. So you can just see the aesthetic is a lot more similar, and you can get the updated documentation. In particular, docs have been added about geometry serialization and processing geometry with multiple representations. This allows people to use Python bindings to script the conversions that the IFC convert is capable of, giving you more flexibility in specifying elements and context filters or chaining events that might be tricky using shell commands. Similarly, documentation about creating geometry from Open Cascade has been written. The Shape Builder documentation has been updated significantly with more hints, improved text, and code samples to help people writing code to generate IFC geometry. Like it's been emphasized, you can access this all without having to go through Blender if you don't want to. Dirk Ulbrich has also made significant contributions in cleaning up the documentation structure for developers to improve maintainability, which is brilliant. Thank you, Dirk. The next point is translation and I18N support. The infrastructure is now in place to support translations of the UI into multiple languages. There's also another add-on which helps translators manage translation strings. Note that we don't currently have any actual translated languages, but community ones are helpful and welcome. But it's good to know that we've got a method to tackle it in the future. Read more about the translation process in the documentation. I know there are a number of people using BlenderBim in multiple languages, so please contribute, and yeah, we can start getting this more internationally acceptable. All right, next point. IfcTester upgraded to support IDS version 0.9.7. IDS 0.9.7 in the latest IDS specification was released a month ago at this time, and we now support it. A number of critical bugs were also fixed, including invalid handling of prohibited facets and inability to export test reports to ODS. You can also now enable generation of ODS reports from the interface. IDS checks on properties and quantities are also now much faster, which is all very brilliant. And you can just see here, there's a screenshot of what the process looks like. You can now select failed entities in the IfcTester UI. IfcTester can now describe prohibited requirements. IfcTester now has a column showing element type reports, now show the file name of the audited model, and a bug was fixed that prevented some facets to be used as an applicability, and facet ordering is now canonicalized for convenience, so the user doesn't need to define facets in a particular order, which is brilliant. Next is drawing generation upgrades. This is the thing I'm most excited about. When 2D elements like door swings were coplanar with slab surfaces, this would previously lead to Z fighting, which essentially means that you wouldn't see it. Oh, whoop. This meant that sometimes these annotations would not show up. This critical issue has now been addressed with a Z offset for these types of situations, so it will always be visible just for the drawing portion. Some situations where cut objects with holes, example hollow section profiles, might not have had their holes displayed that are now fixed. Brilliant. You can now manage and generate drawings from detached windows. Blender lets you create and split new windows, so this is especially useful for users with multi-monitor setups, like myself. Activating drawings now also works when you have objects isolated. Text symbols and multi-symbol objects can be rotated in the viewport too. Multi-symbol annotations are now also decorated to make it easier to see. That's brilliant. A small but significant usability improvement is that you can now select elements in any order when assigning an annotation to a product for smart annotations instead of the eyedropper. Also, built-in text annotation assets can now be used in any view, not just plan view, which is brilliant. Angles now display using the degree symbol, a wonderful quality of life upgrade. A small but significant change in documentation quality, absolutely. Drawing include and exclude filters now have a new friendly UI, which also lets you use saved searches, which is brilliant. Alright, generating drawings is now a bit more stable. Users would sometimes hit frustrating bugs where drawings would simply fail to generate or activate, but a number of these for various reasons have been solved. There are still more to solve, but progress is being made, definitely. And a wonderful screenshot of the opening design project. They fixed a bug where sometimes elements out of view would still display on drawings. Elements which have no target view applicable to the drawing are also hidden. Annotation of hidden elements are also now hidden. It's really good. XLSX schedules are now supported. URLs and SVG schedules are now clickable. Spreadsheet settings can now be saved alongside the spreadsheet, and the schedule SVG auto-updated when you re-export the schedule, which is awesome. This is quite a new one. There's also now an experimental generation of DXFs. Note that these are simple DXFs which do not yet include annotations, fills, scale drawing views, sheets, layers, and so on, but are sufficient for accurate measurement and referencing in other CAD tools. Okay, cool, so let's try this out. Alright, so we've got our model here, and I've just loaded up my plan view. So I'm just going to activate the drawing, and I'm going to first create the drawing into an SVG. So now that that has printed, I'm going to go back to my drawing tab, and you can see there's a new button called Convert SVG to DXF. So you have to print the SVG first, and then you can convert it to DXF. So if I just click on that button, I can wait a second, and at the bottom here it says 1 drawings were converted to DXF, and then we can just check out that drawing using your 2D CAD program of choice. And you can see here, I've just got that DXF opened in NanoCAD, and it's visual, it is to scale, and everything is kind of polylined up, which is super useful and an amazing start to synchronizing this export-import kind of coordination space with older tech, essentially. But brilliant, awesome. Let's head on back to the updates. And there you can just see a much nicer example that isn't as simple as mine, essentially. Okay, cool, brilliant. New landscape asset library, very exciting. Trees, bushes, shrubs, palms, lollipops, we've got them all. If we don't got them, we've got a tree generator where you can input critical tree dimensions and generate a tree shape for it. The library comes with some generic tree shapes and sizes, as well as some species contributed by SavvyGust27. Thank you so much, SavvyGust. It is also now easier to find built-in asset libraries. Libraries are now separate from project startup templates and stored in different locations. Users can now choose from a drop-down of built-in libraries as well as browse to external sources if needed. There is a bare bones Entourage asset library too. This is brilliant, and it's probably the most visual thing about this update. Let's try it out. Okay, so we're back in our IFC file, and I'm just going to go to Project Overview, and then Project Setup, and then Project Library. And then over here, you can see there's a drop-down, so this is new. And when you click on it, there are all the available libraries that are attached to this version of BlenderBim. So I'm just going to show you the landscape library, since this is what it's mainly about. So I'm going to click on Landscape Library. And then you can see here, it just loads like the default packages. This all comes with BlenderBim. So you don't have to download it if you've downloaded. You don't have to download it separately. And we're just going to go into that, and you can see there's a bunch of different tree options of different sizes, etc. So I'm just going to click on a few of these. You're loading in and displaying inside of the types space. As we go, you can see they're being added to the outliner. And then I'm just going to hide the assets, and we're just going to add a few instances of these tree types. So I'm just going to go to the Create Element tool here. And then at the top here, I'm just going to select Geographic Element, which is where the trees are under. So this top one is apple. So I'm just going to say Shift A. And then you can see we have a bit of an apple tree. And then I'm just going to move it to the side. Why? And then let's add a few more. A beech. I'm actually going to move that to the side as well. And then maybe a small conical tree that is very small. And let's try a Ilux. Okay, brilliant. Okay, cool. So we have a bunch of trees now. And you can see that really there's a whole bunch of shape options and everything. And these are kind of like auto-generated, and some are customized. And some of them also have a 2D representation. So if I go to my documentation and I create a new plan, so new plan, click on that, you can see there's a preview for the tree documentation. So I'm just going to go, yeah, this is being cut by that cutting plane. And I'm just going to move it down a little bit, activate, and you can see we have a nice little tree layout here. So I'm going to activate and print it. And then you can see there are our tree outlines. Very awesome. Okay, cool. Let's move on. Style and shape aspect management. Portions of your object's geometric representation, called representation items, can now have styles, example, colors, and be named. Example, this geometry represents glazing, frame of window, etc. In the past, the management of geometry styling and geometry naming, shape aspects, were hidden from users, happening invisibly in the background as you edited your geometry. The new style and representation item panel now has new tools to assign, create shapes and shape aspects. Create styles and shape aspects. This is incredibly powerful and lays the foundation for a new modeling tool in the future where you can manage representation items individually, example, individual extrusions within a larger shape, which is quite useful for detailing. And here you can see there's just an example of the panel inside of Blender. Let's just go to maybe select something and then go to the geometry and materials. And then we can just go here and you can see that there is a new materials and surface style panel here. And you can see these are all the surface styles that are already inside of the IFC file. You can see they are these styles that give us the glass with the transparency and the frames and all these separate elements, essentially. Okay, cool. Let's get back to it. Style Manager now supports editing refraction styles, lighting styles, and externally defined surface styles. It's quite a lot to get into for this update video, but it's all in there and it's coming along quite nicely. Minor improvements to the style UI. UI is slowly being migrated from the shader graph editor to the property style panel. This has kind of completely happened. This includes linking to external Blender styles. This also means that you can now change per item styles and change shape metadata of non-mesh-like geometry that was previously not possible. You can also remove individual representation items if you dare. So you can remove like an elevation or a planned version of that thing. I would not recommend doing that. The UI is missing a lot of usability improvements to make it more visual and intuitive to navigate these items, but at least something is there now, absolutely. For developers, this also means that APIs related to styles and materials now supports this more granular type of operation, which is brilliant. Okay, moving on to the next one. Completely new OpenCDE API server and bSDD upgrades. OpenCDE is a specification for both servers and clients to send data about BCF, documents, and more for CDEs. We previously had no server implementation, except for a minimal test case, but Martin Wiss has contributed a fully fledged OpenCDE server. Brilliant, thank you, Martin. It implements the Foundation API, BCF API, Documents API in Python, the Fast API framework, and the Neo4j graph database. This project originated as the Control BCF API server, screenshot below, and it'll be really exciting to see what integrations are possible in the future. Alright, note that this is not yet integrated into the Blender interface or other tools, but it's the first step to a future where you can self-host your own CDE, either online or on a local network, and share BCF issues, manage authentication, link documents from online sources, and more. That sounds quite useful. bSDD loading now lets you filter active versus preview domains. It also now lets you fill in values for non-predefined psets and Q2O values, so property sets and quantity sets. Classification references now show a button to open the related bSDD URI, and bSDD service has now been updated to point to a new bSDD API. Classification and classification references can now be added manually instead of from a library or from the bSDD. Fixed a bug where removing classification reference might remove the wrong one. Alright, moving on. Continued MEP work and modeling improvements. There is a new cable carrier and cable tool grouped with the new MEP tool submenu. Minor bugs related to the drawing system annotations and finding compatible distribution fittings fixed. Also fixed some incorrect coordinates when adding ports or placing on bends. Fixed UI bug where ports showed incorrect data after pressing undo. Deleting objects now also removes control relationships. You can also now regenerate and connect non-profile based distribution elements. The duplicate systems UI have now been merged. Fixed a bug adding a bend between two co-located segments. Fixed regression where you couldn't duplicate space boundaries. Outer boundaries now overlap inner boundaries. A new approach has been taken towards auto-generating boundaries for an entire space and all of its related building elements. There should be a more robust and better result in the first level boundaries. Boundaries that have already been loaded are no longer loaded twice. You can also toggle all boundaries and only boundaries for a single space. This all sounds brilliant. Related to modeling boundaries, a number of fixes were made to improve robustness of automatic space generation, and it has been welcome. It feels much more intuitive. You can also now insert doors and windows into horizontally layered elements like slabs and roofs. This means you can easily model skylights, trapdoors, and access panels. And you can now generate ceilings from walls using the new covering tool. You can now toggle openings when you have an opening selected for convenience. You can also apply openings in bulk. Fixed bug where cloning openings created invalid IFCs, slope roofs can now be specified as a percentage instead of an angle. Okay, brilliant. Okay, yes, and you can just see an example screenshot from that opening design project. Nested objects are now shown in the collection tree when loading models. Nesting is also considered for when displaying indirect spatial containment. There is a new UI to manage nest hosts and components similar to the aggregates panel. For other software that don't support nesting, there is a new convert nest to aggregate recipe to fix common issues when nested elements won't load in Revit, which is quite welcome for interoperability. Okay, moving on to the next one. Incremental IFC 4x3 support, which is the latest version of IFC. There is now basic support for migrating from IFC 4 to 4x3. Because we don't yet support migrating everything, the schema migrator script for now starts reporting errors when we haven't yet supported a schema migration yet. There's now an upgrade to IFC 4x3 button when loading models, similar to how you can upgrade to IFC 4 as well. Although downgrades are less supported, more support has been added recently. And a wonderful road infrastructure screenshot. Sequencing utilities and APIs have been updated to fix minor issues here and there, but more importantly support IFC 4x3. Purging unused types has been updated to work with IFC 4x3. IFC 4x3 models that use nesting with alignment and reference now load. Note there is actually a huge amount of work being done to support esoteric geometry in 4x3 in the background in IFC OpenShell version 0.8, which is making good headway at the moment. Thanks to Rick Bryce and Thomas Kridgen. For those interested, see an example there. Okay, cool. Let's move on. The next one is so much more. It's hard to capture absolutely everything which has changed, but there are a few more stragglers. Bulk select multiple arrays from multiple parts. Bulk refresh link to aggregates. Stairs can now have parametric nosings and angled treads. Excellent. Fixed a critical bug where normals of the stair were incorrect. Stairs will also now auto-calculate a pitch parameter. Awesome. Purge data recipe now also considers shape aspects names and presentation layers and works on IFC 2x3. Clipping planes now have a standardized structure in the API for programmers. Improved calculation of roof quantities, awesome. New tessellate elements patch recipe to ensure critical elements can still be loaded by software missing support for particular IFC geometry. It also now supports the ability to force using faceted B-reps instead of polygonal face sets. Improve georeference guessing by considering placements too, and fix critical regression in previous release where offset geolocation completely broke in some cases. New set world coordinate system patch for software that uses this attribute. This can fix models that use non-zero world coordinate systems. Fix critical bug where user-defined objects couldn't have their type classes reassigned. It's quite annoying. Fix critical bug where loading materials with unsupported reflectance methods caused loading to fail. The placement panel now shows non-offset placements if there is a coordinate offset active in the session. Brilliant. Select IFC class now considers the classes of all selected objects, not just the active one, to make bulk selection easier. Shift clicking also now considered predefined type. IFC FM now auto-detects available FM recipes. That's great. Fix UI bug where groups might not load. That's awesome. Power users can now disable the BIM toolbar or workspace if an IFC isn't loaded by default. Excellent. Big optimization to editing object placement of objects with lots of child elements. Excellent. Optimization is always good. Fix critical bug where pset applicability didn't consider inheritance, so now more psets should be available to assign elements. Similarly, some psets that were applicable to predefined types are now available. This made this a lot easier to deal with. Fix critical regression where duplicates and linked duplicate hotkeys were broken in vanilla Blender. Owner history entities are now appropriately purged in all known operations. Reassigning occurrences or types now also reassigns the correlating occurrence or type. That makes sense to me. Various under the hood work in preparation to support Python 3.12. 3.11 is now added into the bulk matrix. So this is actually now supported with the next release. When visualizing diffs, it can now partially load diffed elements. This means that you only need one model loaded to do a diff instead of two. A critical bug was fixed when IFC diff would report incorrect results when types didn't change. IFC diff also now uses the new facet-based filtering system. You can now regenerate automatic occurrence names. You can now add a reference image that also includes IFC textures. The image can be referenced using a relative path, something I will show in a separate video. Fix bugs related to loading UVs for projects not using meters, and add prototype support to save the UV to a style, which is awesome. Support added for loading blob textures and pixel textures. Fixed bug where textures should apply to non-facet geometry. New UI to change the texture coordinate mapping method. Fix 2 minor bugs in city JSON to IFC that might cause some geometry to fail to convert. The Fix Revit TINs patch that resolves many issues related to TINs. Revit can now differentiate between solid tins and surface tins. Normals can now be normalized for surface tins. You can now delete rooted elements in IFC OpenShell missing a global ID. New citation file format files available for academics wanting to cite more specific utilities of IfcTester OpenShell. That's very welcome. Fix critical bug when editing set geometry didn't allow for optional axis definitions in some IFC models. So this is like if you want to adjust something in a different plane or a different axis, it's a welcome fix. Fix bug when switching geometry to a text literal failed. Fix bug where some vanilla panels would sneak into the interface and wouldn't get unregistered properly. So just a user interface thing. Patch recipes can now be performed in place on the file and all sorted alphabetically for usability. The patch input is now optional. Fix displaying derived task durations and more lenient loading of CSV work schedules. Unit basis is now considered when calculating resource costs. Cost value names are now shown. Fix issue with calculating costs with a parent cost. Record formula and resource name for cost values when calculating resource cost. A bunch of conversion unit base, example Imperial, now shows symbols. Fix bug with importing counted elements in cost schedules. A critical bug was fixed where removing nested cost items resulted in a broken model. This is an all-round kind of generally making costing and scheduling much easier. Purging unused types now works on window and door styles and IFC type products. Brilliant. The tab properties UI now works on external windows or temporarily full-screened windows, example control space hotkey. There's also a new UI for IFC object and edit modes. So very helpful if you have multiple screens, like I mentioned. The pset template module can now alter quantity templates, not just properties. Awesome. The lifecycle analysis module has been removed. The search query module now supports filtering by group and querying values that contain a substring. Inserting objects onto a space has different modes to choose from. Choose how the RL, the Z value, is determined. The selector now supports filtering for objects contained in location or filtering for spatial elements aggregated in other locations. There is now an advanced feature to bulk purge orphans, so things that have no location in the file. The more experimental operators have been relocated to the debug panels to be used by advanced users. Fix bug where doors and windows couldn't be part of assemblies. Reverting and reloading IFCs has been consolidated. Fix critical bugs where loading cost items with no value from CFC would lead to a crash. A number of validation bugs and UX issues which could lead to invalid data were fixed under the hood. These rarely affect users until it's too late, and it's our mission to ensure that everything we do in IFC is valid to ISO standards, which is brilliant. Validation tool also now reports if no errors were found. Objects that are copy-pasted are now always unlinked. This prevents issues where people copy and paste across Blender sessions and get invalid IFC data, which is very, very common. A critical bug was fixed that allowed people to duplicate the IFC project, yikes, or be stuck in a loop where they couldn't unlink an invalid element. There is now an indicator if your model contains unsaved data, save early, save often. Fixed a bug when trying to load a filtered IFC 2x3 model didn't work. The merge type by mode when loading models doesn't break if your objects don't have names. Brilliant fix. Loading also now skips excessively voided objects for performance. If you have 1,000 booleans on a single object, that object needs to rethink its life goals. Absolutely. A crash was fixed that it could occur when removing booleans, which is just openings. An important UX improvement was made to indicate that users tried to assign IFC elements when in edit mode. That's brilliant. A critical bug was fixed with the extract elements IFC patch recipe that led to a lot of irrelevant elements being extracted if they share a material. The shader-based section cutaway tool has been updated to work with Blender 4.0 and above, as demonstrated, which was great. Fixed a critical bug where sometimes an updated object placement could corrupt other objects. That sounds terrible, but glad it's fixed. A huge bug fix in IFC Convert now excludes bounding boxes by default when intended to get everybody pretty confused when they kept on seeing boxes instead of their model elements. Bounding boxes just define like the height and width of the object, and it's kind of like an invisible boundary just to define the general shape, the square shape of your object, even if it's more complicated than a box. So most of the time it's invisible, but it's one of the representations of the object. Little usability improvements, such as to support default Blender hotkeys for jumping to file path locations. The two methods of generating spaces are also shown in the UI. An important bug fix was fixed when editing psets to ensure that null properties are purged. A critical bug was also fixed when you couldn't remove psets from materials and profiles. This was quite annoying, and I'm really glad it was fixed. Critical crashes were fixed when reassigning classes in certain situations. A common point of confusion about the mandatory nature of owner histories in IFC 2x3 has been addressed in the API. When editing a profile-based shape axis, like a beam or a member, its local Z rotation is no longer reset. You can also now join multiple extruded objects for projects not using SI, Standard International Units. Unit conversion for plane angle units, basically degrees and radians, are now available as utility for developers, which is awesome. Inherited quantity sets are now shown separately to property sets. You can now assign XYZ coordinates from a spreadsheet in bulk with IfcCSV. Selecting similar types is now much faster. Opening IFC files can now be multi-threaded, awesome. IfcCSV has had various bug fixes related to importing data with invalid data types. Summaries now have formatting. A few bugs were fixed in the saved search filter system when loading and saving searches. Okay, brilliant. If you want to see all the changes, it's available in this link. And please, credits to everybody. Thank you, Andre. Thank you, Dion. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Grande. Thank you, Dirk. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, everyone here, for all your comments and commits. And thank you to everybody who's donated and had contributed to the project. We really appreciate you. All right, everyone. Thank you. That's it for this update. The next one will be very soon, and there will be another one even sooner after that. Have a good day. Bye. Thanks for watching.